On September 23, 1999, a $125 million NASA spacecraft approached Mars. The Mars Climate Orbiter was supposed to slide into a precise orbit to study the planet's weather. Instead, it flew too low, entered the atmosphere, and disintegrated. The cause was not a catastrophic hardware failure. It was a conversion error. One team of engineers at Lockheed Martin used pounds of force. The NASA team in California used the metric unit, newtons. This is why, to this day, American high school students have to learn two sets of units. It's why a 2-liter bottle of soda sits next to a gallon of milk in the grocery store. The United States is a measurement island, a place of inches, pounds, and gallons, in a world that has almost universally adopted the metric system. Only 2 other countries officially hold out: Liberia and Myanmar. So why is America stuck? The common answer is simple stubbornness, a cultural resistance to change. But this explanation is too simple, and it misses the real story entirely. The truth is stranger, and it involves a forgotten accident of history, a bizarre tale of high-seas piracy, a captured scientist, and a single, lost piece of metal that was supposed to define America's future. Our story starts with a thesis. The United States never adopted the metric system because a set of pirates in 1794 inadvertently created a power vacuum. They captured a ship carrying the official prototype of the kilogram, a standard destined for Thomas Jefferson. That single event prevented the young nation from adopting a logical standard when it was still new and nimble enough to do so. Because that kilogram never arrived, a crucial void was left at the heart of the American economy. This vacuum was then filled, not by a government plan, but by the raw, chaotic power of the Industrial Revolution. America's burgeoning railroadmen, iron magnates, and factory owners built their own systems from the ground up, all based on the old British inch. To understand why your car's speed is measured in miles per hour, you have to understand the story of that lost kilogram. We will trace this single, consequential accident through 2 centuries of history. We will see how a single act of piracy on the Atlantic set in motion a chain of events that quite literally bolted America to the inch, making any future change not just a cultural debate, but an economic impossibility. This is the story of the ghost of the lost kilogram. To understand the chaos of that lost kilogram, you first have to understand the man who was waiting for it: Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson wasn't just a politician. He was a creature of the Enlightenment. He was a scientist, an inventor, an architect, a man obsessed with reason, logic, and order. And when he looked at the way Americans measured their world, he saw nothing but irrational, inherited chaos. The system the new nation used was the British imperial system, a confusing jumble of units inherited from feudal England. A foot was, at some point, based on a king's foot. An acre was the amount of land a man could plow in a day. These were not the measurements of a modern republic. For Jefferson, they were a form of mental tyranny, a constant nagging reminder of the illogical, aristocratic world America had just broken away from. This is why, for Jefferson, creating a new system of measurement was a profoundly political act. As Secretary of State, he urged Congress to adopt a decimal system for weights and measures, just as he had successfully done for the nation's currency. His first proposal was ambitious and elegant. A new foot would be based on the swing of a pendulum, a constant of nature that could be reproduced in any laboratory on Earth. It was to be a system for all time, for all people, a declaration of intellectual independence. But while Jefferson was dreaming of his pendulum, a similar, even more radical dream was taking shape in revolutionary France. French scientists were developing their own decimal-based system, one based not on a pendulum, but on the circumference of the planet itself. They called their unit of length the asterisk meter, and from it, derived units for volume the liter, and mass the gram. Jefferson was a pragmatist. He saw the strategic genius of the French plan. Why create a uniquely American system if an international one, based on the same rational principles, was on offer? Aligning with France, a key ally, on a universal standard, would give American merchants and scientists a powerful advantage on the world stage. The goal was logic, not national pride. So Jefferson made a calculated decision. He would put his own plan on hold and explore adopting the French system. But to do that, he needed a physical reference. He needed an official, perfectly calibrated artifact from Paris to serve as the master standard for the United States. And in 1793, a French scientist named Joseph Dombey was dispatched to deliver it. A small, unassuming copper cylinder representing 1 kilogram. What Jefferson didn't know was that Dombey's ship had to cross an ocean crawling with pirates, and that little piece of metal would never reach him. The mission entrusted to Joseph Dombey was more than a simple delivery. It was a calculated act of scientific diplomacy, a handshake between the world's two newest republics. Dombey himself was the perfect choice. He wasn't a courier. He was a renowned botanist and physician, a man who understood that classifying a plant and standardizing a weight came from the same Enlightenment impulse, the desire to impose rational order on a chaotic world. His motivation was the quiet, burning faith of a scientist who believed that a shared language of measurement could bind nations together more tightly than any treaty. His cargo was the physical manifestation of that faith. Tucked securely in the hold of his ship, the Time Soon, was the meter stick, a precisely crafted iron bar representing 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator. And beside it, the crucial prototype, a small copper cylinder, its mass derived directly from that meter. This was the Time's grave, the precursor to what we now call the kilogram. Thomas Jefferson, waiting in Philadelphia, these were not just pieces of metal. They were the keys to unlocking his vision for America. He knew that adopting the French system would give American farmers, merchants, and inventors a universal language, an immediate advantage in a world still dominated by a confusing patchwork of imperial weights and measures. This is why the journey was so critical. The entire plan hinged on Dombey's success. He was to present the meter and the kilogram directly to Congress, with Jefferson's backing. The presentation would be a moment of high political theater, a demonstration of a system so logical, so elegant, that it would seem self-evidently superior. It was meant to be the moment America formally joined an international scientific consensus, cementing its alliance with France and its identity as a nation of reason. The stakes could not have been higher. One man, on one ship, carried the standardized future of an entire continent. As the Soon left the port of Le Havre in the spring of 1794, it carried the hopes of scientists and statesmen on both sides of the Atlantic. What no one could fully account for was the brutal reality of the ocean itself, and the predators who hunted in its lawless waters. The voyage began with promise, but the North Atlantic in the 1790s was a place of violent indifference. A ferocious storm struck first. For weeks, Dombey's ship was battered and thrown wildly off course, its sails shredded, its crew exhausted. This act of nature had a direct and fatal consequence. It pushed the damaged vessel south, away from the safe shipping lanes, and directly into the heart of the Caribbean, a hunting ground teeming with privateers. These weren't rogue pirates in the cinematic sense. They were state-sanctioned predators, British captains given license by their government to attack and seize any ship flying the flag of their enemy, France. Because of this, when a ship appeared on the horizon, it wasn't a rescuer. It was the Jackal, a British privateer on the prowl. For the privateers, the crippled French ship was an easy prize. The attack was swift and brutal. Dombey, the quiet botanist, found himself in the middle of a naval skirmish he was utterly unprepared for. The ship was seized, its crew taken prisoner, and its cargo plundered. And here is the devastating twist. To the pirates who ransacked the ship, the meter stick and the copper kilogram were meaningless. They were looking for gold, rum, weapons, anything of immediate, obvious value. A plain iron bar? A small metal cylinder? In their eyes, it was scrap. Scientific junk. The most important artifacts of the rational age were likely tossed aside or sold for pennies, their world-changing significance completely lost on their captors. The physical link between French theory and American reality was severed. Joseph Dombey's fate was just as tragic. He was thrown into a prison camp on the island of Montserrat, where he contracted yellow fever. The man sent to deliver a system of perfect, rational order to the New World died in squalor and obscurity. Back in Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson simply waited. Weeks turned into months. No ship arrived. No message came. There was only silence. The kilogram, and the metric future it represented, was lost to the sea. And because of that loss, a vacuum was created. A void where a standard should have been. That silence from the sea created the void. Jefferson's dream of a rational, metric America died with Joseph Dombey in a squalid island prison. And because of this vacuum, The United States was left without a guiding hand, just as it was about to build itself into a world power. The country was a ticking clock. It needed guns, it needed factories, it needed an industrial base to survive in a hostile world. But how do you build an industrial base without a common standard for measurement? The answer came from a Connecticut farm boy named Eli Whitney. In 1798, with the threat of war with France looming, Whitney made a bold pitch to the federal government. He promised to deliver 10,000 muskets in 2 years, an impossible number at the time. His secret weapon was a revolutionary idea: interchangeable parts. Instead of a single master craftsman building one gun at a time, he would have an army of workers making thousands of identical triggers, identical barrels, identical stocks. The pieces would be like Lego bricks. A lock from one gun would fit perfectly into any other. But here was the critical problem. To make parts identical, you need a precise, universal unit of measurement. So what did Eli Whitney use? Did he wait for a government committee? Did he try to resurrect Jefferson's decimal dream? No. He was a practical man with a deadline. He used what was familiar. He used what every blacksmith and carpenter in his workshop already knew. He used the inch. This decision, driven by pure pragmatism, was the first step down a path from which America would never turn back. Whitney wasn't making a philosophical statement. He was solving an engineering problem. And because his method worked, it was copied across the new nation, in armories and workshops. The inch became the default language of manufacturing. The American Industrial Revolution had begun, and it was being built, piece by piece, inch by inch. This ad hoc adoption of the inch led to a new kind of chaos. Eli Whitney's factory had times him's inch. Another factory in Pennsylvania had times their times inch. A bolt from one workshop wouldn't fit a nut from another. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a massive economic drag. Imagine every phone needing a completely different charger. That was the American industrial landscape by the mid-19th century. A mess of incompatible parts. The nation was building, but it wasn't building together. This is why William Sellers, a brilliant and notoriously blunt Philadelphia industrialist, became so consequential. Sellers wasn't a politician or a philosopher. He was a machine builder who was deeply frustrated by the inefficiency he saw. His motivation wasn't national pride. It was profit. The lack of a standard for the most basic component of all, the screw, was costing him and his customers a fortune in custom work and repairs. So in 1864, Sellers did what the federal government had failed to do for nearly a century. He created a standard. He didn't invent a new system. Instead, he meticulously studied the dozens of competing inch-based screw threads and engineered a single, logical, superior system. He proposed a 60-degree thread angle with a flattened top and bottom, a calculated design that was strong, easy to manufacture, and based entirely on the inch. The effect was immediate. Railroad companies, the titans of the age, adopted it. The United States Navy made it its standard. Within a few years, the Sellers standard became the United States standard. And because of this, a private industrialist had effectively solved the government's problem. William Sellers didn't just formalize the inch. He took the informal habit of American industry and literally bolted it into the nation's economic DNA. Any future conversation about adopting the metric system now faced a new, monumental obstacle. Every factory, every railroad, and every machine in America was now speaking the language of William Sellers, the language of the inch. Because of this, the American industrial system was now shackled to its own success. This is the hidden mechanism of history: path dependence. Think of it like the QWERTY keyboard you're probably typing on. It wasn't designed to be the fastest layout. It was designed to stop old typewriters from jamming. Better layouts exist, but we don't use them. Why? Because every keyboard is QWERTY. Every typist is trained on QWY. And the cost of switching everything and retraining everyone is simply too high. We are locked into the path we started on. This is precisely what happened to the American inch. After William Sellers, the inch wasn't just a measurement. It was an ecosystem. The gears in a factory were cut in inches. The lathes that cut those gears were built in inches. The blueprints for the lathes were drawn in inches. The schools that trained the draftsmen taught them to think in inches. The railroads that connected the factories ran on rails spaced by feet and inches. And then, America became the workshop of the world. By the early 20th century, this vast, interconnected, inch-based machine was churning out steel, cars, and skyscrapers at a scale humanity had never seen. Its very efficiency became the ultimate argument against change. So what would a switch to metric have cost? It wasn't about changing road signs. It was about retooling every factory. It meant throwing out billions of dollars worth of machinery, gauges, and dies. It meant retraining millions of skilled workers, engineers, and mechanics, forcing them to unlearn the intuitive language of their craft. The cost would have been astronomical. It would have meant grinding the most powerful industrial engine on Earth to a halt. And for what? To adopt a system that, for the men on the factory floor, offered no immediate, tangible benefit. They had already solved their problem. William Sellers had seen to that. The nation had reached the point of no return. So how does a pirate attack from over 200 years ago explain why your milk comes in gallons, but your soda comes in liters? It's because we are living with the ghost of a lost kilogram. The story began with Thomas Jefferson's rational dream of a decimal-based America, a vision of scientific clarity for a new republic. That dream depended on a physical object. A platinum iridium cylinder, a prototype kilogram, sent from France. But when pirates seized Joseph Dombey's ship in 1794, they didn't just steal a piece of metal. They created a power vacuum, a standards vacuum. Into that void stepped American industry. For decades, it improvised with its inherited, chaotic system of inches and feet. This chaos became an economic drag, until a pragmatic industrialist named William Sellers finally bolted the country together. He didn't use Jefferson's metric ideals. He used the inch that was already in every workshop. His standard was a calculated business decision that became the nation's economic destiny. This created a powerful path dependence, an industrial ecosystem so deeply rooted in the inch that the cost of changing it became unthinkable. The final proof? The Metric Conversion Act of 1975. After decades of debate, Congress finally passed a law to guide the U.S. toward the metric system. But here's the twist. The law made conversion entirely voluntary. Why? Because the politicians in Washington knew what the industrialists knew. Forcing a change would have been economic suicide. The industrial lock-in, born from that 18th century standards vacuum, was now so total that the United States government itself was powerless to break it. The act wasn't a bold step forward, it was a quiet admission of defeat. This is why your world is a mix of measurements. Global industries, like automotive, pharmaceuticals, and science, use the metric system to compete in a global market. They made the switch because the cost of not time switching was higher. But domestic industries, the ones built on that old infrastructure of construction, plumbing, and manufacturing, are still speaking the language of William Sellers. Your 2-liter bottle of soda is a product of global trade. Your 2x4 piece of lumber is a product of path dependence. In the end, America's measurement system wasn't a deliberate choice against a better way. It wasn't about patriotism or stubbornness. It was an accident. It was the cascading consequence of a single, pivotal event, a random act of piracy, whose ghost still haunts every American gas pump, grocery store, and workshop today. If you found this eye-opening, hit subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden causes. And leave a comment. What's the most confusing measurement you have to deal with in your daily life?